In a world that seems increasingly out of control, every once in a while, we hear stories that make us stop and wonder. Stories that confront us with evidence of things we can't see or measure. Stories that seem to pull back a curtain, revealing one who is still in charge. Everyone has faith in something. Brian came to the U.S. as a visitor from India, but he overstayed his visa so he could work and send money back to his struggling family. Later, he was joined by his wife and brother.
I and my wife did file for our legal status. We got approved, but then again for our green card, our permanent residence, we had to file again. There was a lot of money involved in this process, and we were basically just working and paying the lawyers the money. And for some reason or the other, it always used to get denied. We used to appeal, it used to get denied, and this used to take like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and still we never had a legal status, and it was just going on and going on.
Even though Brian was troubled, he was not without close friends.
I met Brian about 15 years ago. He was working at an Indian restaurant, and he was a waiter there, and he was running the restaurant too. And we became friends because I was attending the restaurant quite a bit.
I got close to one family. He was an Italian, his wife was a Filipino. So we actually grew very close to each other.
When his wife and daughter came to the country, we became family friends. And we started socializing outside of the restaurant and had a kindred spirit together. Brian's one of those guys that's easy to trust. He's a real friend to you.
My wife was carrying my child, in fact, and the child died in the stomach. And after that, the next week, my brother died. And after my brother dying, I was lost completely.
We got even closer after his brother passed away of a heart attack. And we were there together at that time, and the roots went a lot deeper after that.
So it was like one after another things happening. And I never had my papers. So things were getting, real tough. After that, I did a couple of odd jobs here and there, driving the taxi, and then working in the gas stations. Then again, I joined one of my very good friend, his gas station I joined. So I was working with the owners who were Muslims, and they knew I was Christians. But that did not, make any difference for them. I was a person they could trust. The customers, they knew me by name, in fact, because it was a while I used to work. Like I did 5, 6 years. They shared a very close relationship. Whatever house problems they had, they used to come and let me know about it. And in that neighborhood, that basically they say that neighborhood is a crime, lots of crime happening here, there, shootouts. But I never felt that, that fright, something is going to happen to me, because I used to be friendly with everybody over there, in fact.
I did get my work permit and my social, but that also got denied because my sponsor couldn't show sufficient funds. And then my papers went to the court. Saying that as your papers cannot go more ahead, you have to go back to your country, you have to leave.
Yeah, we had gotten a letter that says we were going to get deported. And I mean, my parents really never told me much, not to affect me, because I was like, oh, deported. I was 7th grade, didn't really understand what that meant or anything. So it wasn't like, oh, okay. I thought, oh yeah, we're going to India, that's fun. Haven't seen my grandparents, but to my family, that means back to suffering, back to hard work.
So I was in a removal proceedings. That means they would send me back home to India. We used to ask ourselves, why is this happening to us? Why is this happening to us,
And I knew a lot of people said that, you don't have to go back, you can still here, you have 10 years hardship with your children here, you can still live around. But my thing was already in the court. I couldn't. If I go any part of US, they would know with my car insurance or residence or anything that I would have been in trouble. So I said, you know what, I will leave.
Neither they had to change the law or give everybody asylum, or some new law had to come in, and that was nothing which would take place at that very moment.
One day, Brian was working the daytime shift at the convenience store instead of his normal overnight shift.
It was approximately at 10:30 in the night, 10:30 to 10:45. That was a time when I was supposed to get over with my shift. So I was doing all my paperwork and everything. So I was all by myself. So there was one regular customer who I knew him, and he was all by himself. He asked me, he wanted to buy something. So he asked me, can I get this? So at that time, as I told you, I did not consider it a fright that I was, scared of that place because everybody knew me. So I went out. As soon I went out, I opened the door and I went out to open the phone accessories. Suddenly, 3 guys came jetting in and they had guns in their hand. I thought it was a joke because I really never thought that, it was something real happening, it was a robbery. And they turned me around for me to come in the bulletproof where the register is. So as I turned, not doing nothing, they just shot me in the back of my leg. After that, when I gave them the money, I was just praising God. And there was only 3 words I was continuously raising. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. So once I opened both the registers, they caught me by my shoulder and they dragged me because they knew that in the office there was money in that. As they were taking me to the office, I seen a raise on the floor with golden words, Jesus, and I could see it. That was a time basically gave me more of that faith that nothing is going to happen to me, that, oh, Jesus is there with me, and here he is, but still I was telling these words, thank you, Jesus, praise Jesus, I love you, Jesus. I could hear the other person with the gun telling me, give me the money. And that's the time I told him, okay, take the money on the side, because I knew we always kept 100 ones. It was in the drawer. I dragged myself all the way down to the phone, tried to dial 911, but I never knew. The same year, I put the phone in my ear and I could not hear the dial tone. So I was in the impression that there was something wrong with the phone. There was chunks of blood just coming out. Never in my life I seen that chunks just coming out, and I was getting suffocated because I could not breathe. Again, I tried to dial 911. So still I could not hear the dial tone, so I just kept the phone and I just hung my head down and I was just on the ground. And then suddenly one of a customer who I knew, he came in and he looked at me saying, "Oh, Brian, what happened?" So he knew that something wrong has happened because he could see the blood. So suddenly he dialed 911.
Man, I was scared, man. Blood was coming all out of his mouth.
This man doesn't want to be identified after he found the Citgo convenience store clerk shot inside the store. The man says he entered the store to find the clerk alone and injured, and that he'd been shot in the head.
At my position, I was the chief surgery resident at the time. So when a trauma alert comes in, a lot of times if it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill, not too heavy trauma, I let some of the junior residents take care of it for their own experience. I called down there and they say, you know, it's a gunshot wound to the head. So obviously that's a pretty serious injury. That's not something I let the junior residents take care of. So I rush down there and I get down there and I wonder where the guy is. Usually there's a lot of hoopla. Usually everybody's just frantic, trying to get things done, and that just wasn't occurring. And you know, there's this guy in the trauma bay just sitting there, and he looked completely comfortable. We found some blood in his right ear, and he had a wound in his left neck, and he also had a gunshot wound to his leg. But for a gunshot wound to the head, I mean, he shouldn't have. First of all, chances are he probably wouldn't have lived. Second of all, if you get there after a gunshot wound to the head, you're in a bad way. So after we find out that they're stable, we do a slew of tests. We do check labs, just basic labs. We get a plain film of the C-spine, of the cervical spine. We also get a plain film of the chest. Bullets are tricky, they can go anywhere, so you never know. And then after that, we knew it was probably an entry wound to the right ear and an exit wound to the left. There's a lot of important structures in between those 2 points. Because we thought he most likely had an injury, and even if he didn't have an obvious injury, we would need to take him to the operating room to make sure of that, because there are so many structures in between there. If you don't diagnose it and treat it right away, it can be fatal later on.
And then they told me over there that my husband was shot and he's inside the surgery room, and there's no chances of what's going to happen to him because he was shot on his head. He was vomiting chunks of blood and everything.
Bindu was just screaming over the phone. She was really, really upset, and she said, "Brian's been shot."
And my husband got the call and was talking, and his tone was serious.
He had been shot in the leg with a .45, and he'd been shot through the ear and neck with a .45, and apparently he'd lost a lot of blood, and she actually thought he was going to die.
95% of people who are shot in the head will die, and only 2% will live without disabilities. Brian's chances of survival were even lower, since he was shot with a .45, the largest practical handgun caliber in use.